Hey everybody, Rick here from Save vs. BS. Now, when I was a kid, I read the words Turn Undead in my first Dungeons & Dragons rulebook, and I thought it meant that the cleric was actually turning into an undead thing. I remember staring at that phrase, Turn Undead, like it was a curse written in a language that I thought I maybe understood. And in a weird way, maybe I did understand because the ability always felt darker than the rules admitted. Most players know that the cleric didn't exist in the original chainmail fantasy rules. It wasn't born out of theology. It wasn't meant to model real-world religion. It was invented almost overnight to deal with a problem, and that problem was a vampire. According to legends, Dave Arneson had a player running a vampire lord named Sir Fang, and nobody could stop him. So Gygax created the cleric as a countermeasure, not a priest or a paladin, but a monster hunter, half fighter, half magic user with one job: keep the dead dead. He was modeled after Van Helsing, not St. Francis. And his signature power move? Turn Undead. The term is confusing, let's be honest. Turn Undead sounds like you're turning into some kind of skeleton or monster, like it's some transformation. And if you think that's dumb, well, you've never been 8 years old. But in old military and religious language, to turn means to repel, to turn back the horde, to turn away the unclean. And in that context, Turn Undead makes sense. But an 8-year-old doesn't really have that context. Even then, it sounds very clinical, mechanical, and it generally just lacks soul. Mechanically, it's very simple. You roll 2d6, compare it to a chart, skeletons ran, ghouls might flinch, vampires laugh in your face. It was powerful, but clunky, and it gets forgotten by players, resented by dungeon masters, and eventually it's reduced to just an afterthought. Clerics are supposed to be holy warriors. They wear armor, for God's sakes. They smash heads with maces. They face the horrors the rest of the party feared. But that's not how people use them. Somewhere along the way, they got turned into walking band-aids. I cast Cure Wounds again. Healing became mandatory and not fun. It's not thematic, it's just expected. It's a tax you pay to be at the table. Somebody's got to be a healer. Turn Undead just turned into that thing you did at the table when everybody was already dying, and that's probably not what Gygax intended. Hell, even he got frustrated with how clerics distorted party balance. But let's go back to my original misunderstanding. What if Turn Undead did not mean repel? What if it meant accept? What if the cleric didn't just reject undeath, but walked towards undeath, and thus the necromancer is born? Imagine this. Every time a cleric turns, they dip closer to the dark veil. They become a little less mortal. Their skin pales, their breath fogs. They don't repel the dead, they command the dead. And not because they hate death, but because they understand death. That's a way better story, and that's a way better mechanic. That's a cleric who is dangerous. There are several ways you can do this, but this is the one I like. Let me know if you agree or if you have any other ideas below in the comments of how to pull this off. My favorite, it's the classic, but streamline. You take the classic mechanics and simplify. You forget the 2d6. Your very presence initiates the undead to have to make a saving throw against your very presence. Fail, they flee. This empowers the cleric not to waste their action on something that would sort of happen naturally. If Dracula and Van Helsing bumped into each other on the street, it would just happen. Dracula would recognize Van Helsing's level of gangster and he would roll the F out. So it's automatic. We can debate that it just adds flavor, but it frees up the cleric to do actual things that matter. You could go one step further and do a charisma save versus a DC set by the hit dice of the undead, and the player succeeds and the undead flees or cowers or explodes if they roll high. It's quick, it's brutal, it feels like the divine force sweeping through the crypt. Undead with a higher hit dice than your level are obviously immune. Simple, brutal, old school. Each time you roll a 1, you get a corruption point. Your skin goes pallid, your breath fogs, your voice kind of echoes, and eventually you become an unhealer. Your body begins to rot from within, your reflection starts to fade in mirrors. You are pulling divine power from beyond the veil, but that veil cuts both ways. The power to control the dead comes with the price of your humanity. And that's not just game balance, that is narrative tension. Turn Undead was never supposed to be a utility spell. It was supposed to be a confrontation spell between light and dark, between the living and the damned, between what we are and what we fear becoming. So yeah, 8-year-old me got it wrong, but maybe the idea was never that far off the mark. What if you don't turn undead? What if you let the undead turn you? Terrifying. If you like this dive into the mechanics of lore and old school powers, hit the button, do all the things. My Patreon's coming soon. I'll be posting bonus homebrew mechanics, alternate turning charts, and a character write-up for the Pale Shepherd who borders between cleric and necromancer. Until next time, keep your lantern lit and never trust a corpse that looks like it's resting easy. No more walking band-aids.